Hi, I'm Judith Leblein, and welcome to Conversations. Well, occasionally on this show we have a guest that is very interesting to our viewers, and because of that we bring her back. It's Marlene Browne. Marlene has a new book out. It's The Boomer's Guide to Divorce and a New Life. And last show was very well received. I'm afraid there's a lot of people either getting divorced or thinking about divorce.
Well, it happens. It's a transition. It's like a birth. It's a death. Only divorce, unfortunately, you don't get as much support as you should. So when you have a new baby, the neighbors come around, the family comes to live with you. When you have a death, of course, we have the wake process or sitting shiva. When you have a divorce, it's often more alienating. But studies show that divorce is the second most stressful thing you can go through, other than death of a child or a spouse. So it's critical that you realize you're going through something very deep and something that's going to cause you to grieve, but there are not enough resources really for people to have support.
Well, luckily there are people like you that are willing to study this specialty and then turn it into language that we could all understand.
Well, that's a good point. This is my second book on divorce. It's my fourth book all in all. But the first book, The Divorce Process, was a bit more academic, much more formal. And my editors saw, I think she saw me on television, which is how I got to write this book for Penguin International. And she said, look, Marlene, you've got all of this knowledge. You're a lovely lady. Why don't you tone down the formality and speak to us like you're a friend? I know you're a divorce attorney. Why don't you tell us, as if you're having coffee with your friend Judith, what's the deal? And I said, okay. I said, do you want it geared for men or women? She said, gear it for everybody, but make it boomers. I said, okay, what do you mean boomers? And I went ahead and researched that. And,
well, you sure did that, because, I mean, I don't know how you did it, but a book on divorce that's rather funny.
Lighthearted.
There are quotes throughout each chapter that head up each chapter, and why I like that is that if you are contemplating divorce or you're in the middle of divorce and you pick up The Boomer's Guide to Divorce, at least as you begin each chapter you might have a little chuckle, and you did a great job with that.
Thank you very much. My editor said, look, we want you to not only be like a girlfriend or yeah, I'm a girl. I'd be like a girlfriend. But also let people know there are other people who've been through this before. Misery loves company. So I did find these quotes. We've got everybody from Paul Simon to the Beatles. Bob Dylan is in there. All of my favorite boomer references.
Well, and you know, interesting that you bring that up, because growing up as a kid in the 60s, I will tell you that in my neighborhood, no one was divorced. Right. Now that I'm an adult and I understand, it was because they didn't have enough money to fight over and had not enough money to get divorced. I think that there were probably a lot of miserable marriages. However, the stigma on kids, the stigma on a man, the stigma on a woman was so severe then.
Yes.
And, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, today, at least when you're in the classroom, you are not the only divorced kid.
You are, if you are a kid in the classroom, 50% of the people in your class will have come from some sort of divorced family. They'll be in a stepchild situation, or if they're not divorced, their parents will be separated, or at least that's what the studies I have read show. You bring up an excellent point, though, about growing up in the 60s. I was born, first of all, the boomers are people born from 1946 to 1964, and essentially they're the generation that came about when everybody came home from World War II. My parents are very young. I'm almost a boomer born to boomers. My parents are just a little bit older. They were born just a little bit before 46. So I was also steeped in the culture because my parents were kids. So they would come home with their Bob Dylan and their Beatles, and I'd be a little kid, and that was my mother's milk. That's what I listened to. But you're so right with regard to divorce. I knew one child growing up. Now, I was born in 61, which makes me 42. I was born at the end of 61. One child I knew came from a divorced home. And you're right, that child was stigmatized. I talk about the evolution in my book, but primarily the changes came about as the 60s were a revolutionary time, as we know. The boomers saw women's rights, gay rights, how can I forget, you know, the rights?
Available birth control.
Birth control.
Gave women a huge amount of power in relationships and shifted that whole power.
And of course, the civil rights, of course, that was the most important. I don't know how I could forget that. That's all, I lay that all out in the book. The book gives you the social context of what happened. With all of those changes came, everything starts in California in this country, came the realization that people want to be able to move on if something's wrong. Now, the pendulum swung too far so people could get out of marriages way too easily, and I discuss that in the book. But the biggest change came when no-fault divorce hit America in California, and that law was passed in 1969, became effective January 1st, 1970, and then the other states followed suit. Now, in New Jersey, we don't have no-fault. The only no-fault ground is actually if you live separately for 18 months. However, if you allege extreme cruelty, it's really no big deal. No one cares. You don't try the issue of fault. Oddly enough, the only state where you do try the issue of fault is New York. And I don't know if you remember, but Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and Donna Hanover, I was commenting all over the world on that case. That happened in the summer of 2002. And the reason why people were paying attention to that, not only did Mayor Giuliani become so critical, a national figure after September 11th, but because he had alleged his wife was extremely cruel, if you will. They call it something a little bit different in New York, but the idea was that she was extremely cruel. And he was going to have to prove that in front of an open court. Well, everyone wanted to see.
And in front of his children.
And in front of his children, when really she then counterclaimed with adultery. And there were going to be times and dates about his relationship with Judy Nathan, which was quite open and notorious. So that's why they settled that case. So New York, you still have that issue, but New Jersey, you really don't have the issue of fault, even though there are fault grounds. My husband, my ex-husband, excuse me, my present husband
All right,
has
get
not
him
divorced
straight.
me.
Get him straight.
No, please, I know the difference. Chris, wherever you are. My ex-husband was the plaintiff in my divorce case. He wanted to be the plaintiff. He wanted to divorce me. I don't know what his problem was, but he alleged extreme cruelty. Well, was that a problem? No, because that means simply that you go to the court looks at what you've alleged as extreme cruelty allegations. The court will then say to you in open court, when I say the court, I mean the judge, will say, is what you said true in the complaint? And you would say, yes, and that's it. Okay, well then I found you made the grounds for divorce, and then you proceed to go with the rest of the case.
So would you say then, in your opinion, that may have been the biggest change to keep up with the social changes that the boomers experienced? So the whole no-fault idea is the biggest change you've seen?
Absolutely, and I really do cover this in the book. And also, there was a social scientists. There was a movement of social scientists to study this change, and so there's a lot of literature at this point which can tell us what's happened, because it's tracked this change, and not all of it's been good. Certainly when it was new, and really men were getting off so easily compared to women. There is the whole theme of the feminization of poverty, and I think we've touched on that before. And children were growing up without the support they needed, and the women were really having a tough time. And I address that also in the book. But what's happened is then the pendulum swung the other way too far, and then men were having a real hard time making the support payments that were ordered. So now things are a little bit more even-keeled, if you will. However, the federal government has really stepped in and said to anybody who has a support obligation, you're going to pay the support obligation, because we, the government, don't want to step in either locally or in the federal realm and pick up these people, these children on the welfare rolls. That's hard to say. So there's been a move toward, if you're going to have kids, you're going to support them. On the other hand, there's also been a move toward, if you're going to have custody, physical custody of the children, you're going to allow that dad or that mom who's not living with them to see them. Because all of the social data says, if you allow the non-custodial, non-physical custodial parent to have a role in those kids' life after divorce, you're going to have a better chance of receiving payment. So everybody has seen these last 35, really going on 40 years, no, I guess it's more like 35 years, let children have both parents. I have a chapter in this where I discuss Julian Lennon. Now, we all know Julian Lennon. And I really go into detail, and I tell a cute little story about Paul McCartney having written Hey Jude for Julian, and what Julian's words were about seeing his dad after the divorce and how he just lived to see his dad. And I think it's probably one of the best chapters I've written, because it really says to you, look, are you upset at your ex for running off with the secretary, or for your wife for running off with the ski instructor? Of course you are. But guess what? Your kid is half that parent. And if you're going to say awful things about that kid's parent, of whom that child is 50%, that child's going to take that in, because that makes the child bad. And then there's a whole thing, it's like the Stockholm syndrome. The child will take on whatever the craziness is of the custodial parent, because the child wants to feel secure that the child's going to be fine and the child doesn't want to be seen as disloyal. And I really address all of these horrible things that can happen versus the good things that can happen if you just keep the kid out of it. Just let the child's going to have a tough enough time. Let the child have peace with mom and dad. It's just critical. And I give you all the things, the horrible things that can happen if you don't do this. We're talking...
Well, being able to separate a divorce from a mate and a divorce from your family are, you know, are two different things, and I know you cover it very well in the book. So in this idea of moving towards a no-fault world,
yes,
I know for a lot of people it's a sense of pride or personal embarrassment, but as you say, other than the court date, really, who on the first date after your divorce says, "Let me see the papers because I want to see why you got divorced the first time"?
Well, as a lawyer, I might. But
now it might be good. You know, my girlfriends and I
would
always
make for a one-date situation, wouldn't it?
My girlfriends and I have always said you should have an interview with the ex-wife first, just to get both sides of the story. But the idea of the movement towards no fault, how much do you think that this really has to do with women's equality? Because I think that, I was a bra burner in the 70s, and, I fought. It was
we're back
a
on the
rather
track.
large bonfire at the time. But, if we want equality as women, and we really want this to cross all levels of society, then we have to be prepared to be responsible going into marriage and understand that in divorce, if it's equal, then divorce needs to be equal.
That is very true. And I think another terrific chapter is the chapter on the evolution of alimony, which is, I think, where you're getting at. Judith, I couldn't agree with you more. And frankly, I made more money than my ex. He used to kid that he would have me pay him alimony, which I did not do. But that's all fine and good. Women like you, like me, we went on to school, we have careers, but guess what? There are some women born in our generation that really modeled themselves after their moms, who were still the typical June Cleaver stay-at-home moms.
And that's a choice. That's fine.
That's fine, but it's a choice often that both the parties made, that, look, I'll go out, but you stay with the kids because that's important. Well, those women shouldn't really have to be dealing with the same rules that women like you and I should be dealing with in divorce, because they were not going to be CEOs, they were not going to be lawyers, they were not going to be media people. So, but the law was very insensitive at first, and those women really fell through the cracks, and those children too. It was devastating. Now courts are very careful to evaluate factors, and I set forth an aggregate of factors, not just New Jersey's, but I took a sampling of all 50 states and put together a list. And the court really will look to see, wait a minute, were you a stay-at-home mom? Well, wait a minute, we've got to take special care of you because that was your situation. But if someone like me or someone like you got divorced, we would not be getting alimony unless we married someone like Ronald Perlman, the CEO of Revlon, and he made a gazillion dollars, and that was our lifestyle.
I'd marry him for free shampoo.
Okay, Judith, no one else is going to hear that, right? Disregard that, new husband. Okay. But what I think is really critical is when you're going through the divorce process, everyone says, well, gee, what am I going to do? How do I protect myself? First thing, see a lawyer. Okay, because the lawyer is going to tell you what you need to gather together in order to secure your rights, what type of evidence you need to produce, so the court can see what is your lifestyle. The biggest thing for alimony is what is your marital lifestyle, and how do you prove that? You prove that by getting all of your receipts together, your I like people to take video cameras of their house, their wardrobe, their car. Take a log and put together something that you did for your vacations, show the court where you traveled. Was it to Europe? Was it to South America? Whatever. Get your marital lifestyle documented. The court will see what you're used to. The court will see what you're capable of. And frankly, a lot of people are evaluated. You get actual employment evaluators to sit down with, let's say, a woman and say, look, she can make $20,000 a year as a clerk, or she could make $400,000 as a media person. Right. But
in 7 years and 5 years, where she could be.
That's exactly
to give a realistic projection.
In New Jersey I'm admitted in New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Colorado, but I take my continuing legal education in a lot of different states, primarily California, because they're always on the cutting edge. And New Jersey is a very forward state. I'd say the most important states for family law development are California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Wisconsin. I don't know why that is. No relationship. Well, Massachusetts, of course, started the gay marriage thing with the Goodridge case. California is with the no fault. New Jersey, we've done things with move-aways, relocations. New Jersey is also big with college expenses. And Wisconsin is big with also gay rights, gay parenting. I don't know why that is, but that's the way it shakes out because I have to keep on top of this stuff.
The winters are long and cold.
Indeed, they are.
If you're just joining us, with me is Marlene Browne. Her specialty, divorce, and also author of The Boomer's Guide to Divorce and a New Life. And you know, Marlene, some of the hints that you give in this Boomer's Guide to Divorce, I think are good for anyone.
Oh, yes, yes.
What I like about it, what you were just touching on, is knowing your finances, having one place where you know where all of your accounts, what credit cards you have, what debt you have. I think it's an important exercise for anyone to do, and we're so busy that I would venture to guess that most people don't have that. And in this world where we're talking about, you know, emergency plans and being ready for the worst, it's important to get all your ducks in a row, no matter if you're happy as can be or thinking, geez, maybe this marriage may not work.
I couldn't agree with you more, but humans being humans, if it's not important, if it's not necessary, it's going to fall to the wayside. So I couldn't agree with you more. Always keep your fingers on the pulse. As a matter of fact, the spouses who don't are the ones who are in the deepest trouble when, let's say, their husband or wife leaves and they go see a divorce lawyer, they buy a book and say, okay, it's all about the finances. It really is all about the finances. And then you deal with the child aspects, because if you don't have the money, everything else is going to be very, very difficult. So first you see what you're dealing with in the way of money, and then you look at what you're going to do with the children or child. So the spouses that don't do what you say, that don't say, where are our credit cards, where's our debt, where's our money going, what is it costing us to live, what are we looking forward to in the way of retirement, what are we saving? The spouses that don't do that are the worst, I'd say, affected when a divorce comes.
Oh, absolutely. Then they truly are a victim. However, if you plan for just being, you could be widowed.
Exactly,
and not know where all the bank accounts are.
So
if there's anything that you learn today as a woman or a man in a marriage, because many men, and we've seen this even in high-profile cases, the women were the bankers.
Oh, sure. You see that in a lot of the Hollywood cases. Kim Basinger, her first husband was a makeup artist. Joan London, they had a huge fight in the early 90s, she and her first husband, about paying alimony, and she had to pay him alimony. Jane Seymour, huge fight about paying her, one of her spouses, I forget which, alimony. And I only know this because I had to do the research for this book. So you're absolutely right. The corporate women, they tend to settle their matters, and they do that so that they don't do what Jack Welch did, which was have his divorce case spread all over the Wall Street Journal. So the Hollywood people, they don't keep things it's quiet sometimes because publicity is what it is. But the really successful women, you don't hear so much about them because they settle their cases. And if we could talk about that, I'd love to do that.
Absolutely. Before we go to that, though, you know, it's so interesting. So many marriages fall victim to divorce because communication is bad. And then what's the most important thing through divorce and after divorce, especially raising children, is but communication?
If I could solve that problem, Judith, I would be a very happy person, because it would alleviate a lot of pain. But interesting, the book is called Divorce and a New Life, and the last part is really devoted to what do you do to get your stuff together again. And that was the most joyful part of really writing the book, because I got to read all sorts of different things and tell people, look, there is light at the end of this tunnel. But in talking about dating again after divorce, there was a point. I did some research about what makes a good relationship, what makes not for a good relationship, and there are various tests and things and websites. This book is full of resources, so I go through what the basic issues are, and then I say, look, if you want to learn a little bit more about this, go to this study, and I give a free website, or go to that web page, or if there's a law that's important, go to that website. So this book is really full of a lot of great stuff, but some of the tests that I mentioned for a new relationship really measure compatibility, but primarily the studies that I have read said that communication is the #1 thing. because if you're not communicating, you're not going to meet each other's needs. If you don't meet each other's needs, people get resentful. If you get resentful, you get angry, and then there's a spiral there. You stop having sex, you don't want to make the other person happy, and then what happens? Well, maybe that person at work is going to look better and better to you or to your husband. So you're absolutely right. But with people who can't communicate, sometimes after the divorce, all that stuff is laid by the wayside, and they can move on and say, okay, now I'm happier without you, so I can talk to you about the kids.
So that naturally brings us to the newest approach towards divorce, which is mediation.
Well, actually, I'm going to correct you. It's really collaborative divorce.
Oh, okay.
Which
Oh,
is
isn't that nice?
Completely, it's nice, but it's not really taken hold on the East Coast the way it has in the West Coast, of course. Collaborative divorce, as a matter of fact, there have recently been articles about it in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. You can tell what I read, right? One's a very conservative paper, one's a very liberal paper.
It's just such an oxymoron.
Well, you know, there
collaborative
you go.
divorce.
Yes, exactly. Collaborative divorce started in the early 90s or mid-90s by a burnt-out divorce lawyer up in Minnesota. And he was just tired of the rancor and the animosity and the acrimony. I can't think of any other A-long words. So he said, what's a system I can put together to help people? And this collaborative divorce system is interesting in that you will each side gets an attorney. So you're not flying blind or going solo. However, these attorneys will not go to court. So if you threaten your spouse by going to court, you both have to get new attorneys and start the whole process over.
Okay, so you go into it, and your attorneys also agree.
Oh, absolutely. It's a critical part of collaborative divorce.
They got to stay within this
You've
parameter.
got it. Now, how will this work? This will only work if there's no abuse, if there's no great disparity in financial knowledge or power. So it can work if one's the stay-at-home wife and the other is the big bucks CEO, so long as everyone's going to put their cards on the table. Now, if that doesn't happen, it's not going to work at all and you'll have a fraud. I've never seen collaborative divorce work when one spouse was left for another person, because collaborative divorce is to make things easier for everybody, streamlined. So
and if there's a lot of hard feelings,
it's never going to work because you've got to want to move this ship forward together. But in the collaborative model, you hire attorney X, I hire attorney Y. They have us sign an agreement that says if we're going to go to court, we lose their representation. We'll usually we'll retain one expert for the children. We'll retain one expert if we need one for the business. And sometimes we'll each get a coach. What does that mean? That means we'll each get someone akin to a therapist to help us deal with the issues that come up emotionally.
So will you know going into it about how much it'll cost?
It's usually 30 to 40% less than a litigated case. Yes, you're going to pay your attorney, you're going to pay your coach if you need one, you're going to pay the one expert as opposed to each side, and then the court. I mean, you can have a case where a court assigns an expert, you get your expert,
you could have a
I
parade
get my
of
expert,
experts.
and ka-ching, can you say no future retirement?
Right.
So, yes, it's still expensive, but you know what? You get what you pay for, and you know you can tailor something critically matched to meet your goals. Whereas if you go before a court, he or she doesn't know you. They've got thousands of cases. They see you for what, 4 or 5 hours a day if you're trying the case, and that's in between orders to show cause, emergency matters. You don't get continuous court times in most cases. People don't realize that. It's very choppy.
So can you get this in New Jersey today?
You'd really have to search hard. And I have not been able to locate collaborative lawyers in New Jersey yet, but I know that there's a movement toward it. So I would just check with the Bar Association, and my website, marlenebrowne.com, has a bunch of wonderful links, and one of them is to the New Jersey State Bar Association, so I would just keep checking there. It's growing in Connecticut, so that's a good thing. In New York, it's being resisted, which is not surprising because in New York they resisted the change from this trial on fault. So they're 40 years behind the times in New York. People see that as a New York Divorce Attorney Self-Protection Act.
Well, exactly, and I think it's responsive to the people that are saying there's one group, forgive me for saying it, that's making out in divorce by dragging it or instilling hostility that wasn't there to begin with, and that may be the attorney. So I see this as
it's a wonderful thing.
Good situation.
May I compare it to mediation? Mediation is when you hire a mediator who's a neutral third party. So collaboration is a team approach where the attorneys are working with you. Mediation is really based on a mediator. The parties are or not represented. It depends upon them. But you have a mediator who's trying to help the parties come to an agreement, and that mediator may or may not be a lawyer. And if that mediator is not a lawyer and you're not represented by counsel, you could have some real problems, because with divorce, support and custody are always changeable, but property distribution, once it's final, is not. So unless there's fraud, you can't set it aside, and you can only do that for a year.
Especially with the cost of real estate in New Jersey, once it's done, you're not going to be buying another house if it's not an equitable solution.
Same thing with retirement benefits.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Marlene, once again, we have run out of time.
No, I want to talk more.
There's just too many things to talk about divorce. But I really urge our viewers, if you are thinking about divorce, if you think that perhaps you better start planning, you want to get the Boomer's Guide to Divorce and a New Life, and perhaps you've already been through a divorce and you want to get back up on your feet and you want to do it well, Marlene Browne's new book, Boomer's Guide to Divorce. And if she didn't have enough to do, she's got a new novel out, and you did this one for fun, you say?
I did.
It's To Prepare a Face. And Marlene Browne is with N-E, B-R-O-W-N-E. So Marlene Browne is your website?
That's my website,
okay.
marlenebrowne.com. And if you're a viewer, I don't have this posted on the World Wide Web because once I got inundated, but if your viewers want to contact me, it's Marlene at marlenebrowne.com.
That's great. And I find it very, very odd that two newlyweds are talking about divorce. But certainly it's about being self-reliant.
Right.
It's about understanding a relationship and understanding your finances.
And understanding my ex's divorce from his prior wife.
And shouldn't that be for everyone?
I think it should be, Judith.
To be prepared and ready. And I do love the sense of humor that was in this book, because, God, you need a sense of humor if you've been through divorce. I have a friend that's actually been divorced 3 times. And I said to him,
he's still alive?
Yeah, I said to him, why marry again? He says, well, the first was the worst.
So he's getting progressively better?
I guess he's getting better at divorce, but not necessarily
the marriage.
At the marriage.
Well, I'll give him my book.
Yeah, and I would never want to dig ditches. I would never want to be a roofer in the summer, and I would never want to be a divorce attorney or a marriage counselor.
Okay.
So to me, it seems like a very difficult world, but certainly we need someone like yourself to help us navigate through it with a sense of humor. And I think, the sense of hope that you bring in the book is
I'm a believer of my product.
Important.
I'm a divorce attorney, and life is better. I met my husband after 40. It's all good.
Well, that's it, coming from a newlywed perspective. Thanks again, Marlene Browne.
Thank
the book
you.
is Boomer's Guide to Divorce and a New Life. And as always, it's great to have a conversation.